The wind howled off the Maine coast, carrying the salt of the sea and the weight of a decade's silence. Ezra stood on the cliff's edge, his boots sinking into the damp earth, staring at the horizon where the sun bled into the ocean. He hadn't come back to Port Haven for nostalgia. He'd come because his twin, Elias, was drowning, and not just in the metaphorical sense. 10 years ago, Ezra had walked away from this town, from his family, from Elias, after his brother's cold rejection. "You're not my brother anymore," Elias had said, his voice sharp as a blade, when Ezra came out at 17. Those words had carved a wound deeper than any knife, and Ezra had spent years stitching himself back together in New York City, building a life as a photographer, capturing beauty in a world that often felt ugly. But now, a cryptic voicemail from their mother, "Elias is in trouble, Ezra. He needs you," had dragged him back to the place he'd sworn never to return. Port Haven hadn't changed much. The same weathered docks lined the harbor, where fishermen hauled in their daily catch, and the same narrow streets buzzed with the annual harvest festival. Ezra's leather jacket felt out of place among the flannel shirts and knit sweaters of the townsfolk, but he wasn't here to blend in. He was here to find Elias, the brother who'd turned his back on him, the brother who was now, according to their mother, tangled in something dark and dangerous. Ezra's first stop was the Rusty Anchor, a dive bar on the edge of town where the locals didn't ask questions. The air inside was thick with cigarette smoke and the tang of cheap whiskey. He scanned the room, his heart thudding as he searched for Elias's face, his own face, mirrored but different. They were identical twins, but where Ezra's eyes held a spark of defiance, Elias's had always been guarded, cautious. Ezra spotted him in the corner, slumped over a glass of bourbon, his hair longer than Ezra remembered, his frame thinner. Elias looked like a man who'd been running from something for too long. "Elias," Ezra called, his voice cutting through the bar's low hum. His brother's head snapped up, and for a moment their eyes locked, blue, piercing, identical. But Elias's gaze hardened, and he turned away, as if Ezra were a stranger. The rejection stung, but Ezra pushed forward, sliding into the booth across from him. "What are you doing here?" Elias muttered, not meeting his eyes. "Mom called. Said you're in trouble." Ezra kept his tone even, though his chest ached with the weight of their history. "What's going on, Elias?" Elias laughed, a bitter sound. "You think you can just waltz back after 10 years and play hero? Go back to your city life, Ezra. I don't need you." But Ezra saw the tremor in Elias's hands, the way his eyes darted to the bar's entrance every few seconds. His brother was scared, and that fear was enough to keep Ezra rooted to the spot. "I'm not leaving until you tell me what's wrong." Elias leaned forward, his voice low. "You don't get it, do you? This isn't your fight. You don't belong here anymore." The words echoed their last fight, and Ezra felt the old wound reopen. But he leaned in, matching Elias's intensity. "You're still my brother, whether you like it or not. And if you're in deep, I'm not letting you drown alone." For a moment, Elias's mask slipped, and Ezra saw a flicker of the boy he'd grown up with, the one who'd shared secrets under the stars, who'd promised they'd always have each other's backs. But then the mask was back, and Elias stood, tossing a crumpled bill on the table. "Stay out of it, Ezra," he said, and walked out into the night. Ezra followed, his boots pounding the pavement as he trailed Elias through the festival-lit streets. The air was alive with music and laughter, but Ezra's focus was razor-sharp. Elias moved quickly, weaving through the crowd, his shoulders hunched as if he could feel Ezra's gaze. When he ducked into an alley, Ezra hesitated. This wasn't the Elias he remembered. Careful, calculated, always in control. This Elias was running, and Ezra needed to know why. The alley was narrow, shadowed by the backs of old brick buildings. Ezra caught up just as Elias stopped, his back to him, his breath visible in the cold air. "Elias, talk to me," Ezra said, his voice softer now, pleading. "What are you running from?" Elias turned, his face pale in the dim light. "You wouldn't understand," he said, but his voice cracked, betraying him. Before Ezra could press further, a figure emerged from the shadows, a man in a black jacket, his face obscured by a hood. Elias froze, and Ezra's instinct screamed danger. "Who's this?" the man asked, his voice low and menacing. He stepped closer, and Ezra saw the glint of a knife in his hand. Ezra's heart raced, but he stepped in front of Elias, shielding him. "Back off," he said, his voice steady despite the fear clawing at his chest. The man smirked, but before he could move, Elias grabbed Ezra's arm and pulled him back. "Run," Elias hissed, and they bolted down the alley, the man's footsteps echoing behind them. They ducked into a side street, losing their pursuer in the maze of Port Haven's backroads. When they finally stopped, gasping for breath, Ezra turned to Elias, his eyes blazing. "Who was that? What the hell have you gotten yourself into?" Elias looked away, his jaw tight. "It's complicated," he said finally, "and it's not your problem." But Ezra wasn't letting go. Not this time. He grabbed Elias's shoulder, forcing him to meet his gaze. "You don't get to push me away again. Not after everything. Tell me the truth, Elias, or I swear I'll follow you until I figure out myself." For the first time, Elias's eyes softened, and Ezra saw the weight his brother carried. Guilt, fear, and something deeper, something like regret. "Okay," Elias said, his voice barely above a whisper. "But not here. Not now. Meet me at the old lighthouse tomorrow night. I'll tell you everything." Ezra nodded, his heart heavy with a mix of hope and dread. As Elias disappeared into the crowd, Ezra stood alone, the festival's lights blurring around him. He'd come back to save his brother, but he was starting to realize that saving Elias might mean confronting the ghosts of their past and the secrets Elias had been running from all along. The lighthouse stood like a sentinel against the stormy Maine sky, its beam cutting through the fog that rolled in from the Atlantic. Ezra arrived early, his camera slung over his shoulder, a habit from his city life where he captured fleeting moments to make sense of the chaos. Tonight, though, the only moment he cared about was the truth Elias had promised. He paced the rocky path leading to the lighthouse, the wind tugging at his jacket. Memories of their childhood flooded back. Summer spent racing along these cliffs, Elias always a step ahead, challenging Ezra to keep up. They'd been inseparable then, two halves of a whole, until Ezra's truth had shattered that bond. He'd never understood why Elias, his mirror image, couldn't accept him. The rejection had been a betrayal, but the love hadn't died, not entirely. Elias arrived just as the sky darkened, his silhouette sharp against the lighthouse's glow. He looked worse than the night before, his eyes shadowed, his movements jittery. "You came," he said, his voice flat but laced with something like relief. "You said you'd tell me everything," Ezra replied, crossing his arms. "So talk." Elias hesitated, glancing out at the churning sea. "It's not that simple, Ezra. I didn't just get into trouble. I got in deep with the wrong people." "Who?" Ezra pressed, stepping closer. "That guy in the alley? What does he want with you?" Elias's jaw tightened. "His name's Victor. He runs a crew out of Boston. Smugglers, mostly, moving stuff through the coast. I got involved a few years back. Thought it was easy money." He laughed, a hollow sound. "Turns out, you don't just walk away from people like Victor." Ezra's stomach twisted. Smuggling? Elias, the golden boy who'd always play by the rules, was tangled up with criminals? "Why didn't you tell someone?" "Mom?" "The cops." Elias's eyes flashed. "You think I didn't try? Victor's got people everywhere. Cops, harbor masters, even some of the fishermen here. I try to get out, Ezra. That's why he's after me. I know too much." Ezra's mind raced, piecing together the fragments. The fear in Elias's eyes, the man with the knife, it was all starting to make sense. "What do they want now?" "They think I've got something of theirs," Elias said, his voice low. "A ledger. Names, dates, shipments. I don't have it. I never did, but Victor doesn't believe me. He thinks I'm holding out, and he's not the type to ask nicely." Ezra's fists clenched. "So what's the plan? You just keep running until they catch you." Elias looked at him then, really looked at him, and Ezra saw the boy he'd once known, scared but stubborn, the same boy who'd climbed the lighthouse on a dare and nearly fallen. "I don't know," Elias admitted. "I thought I could handle it, but it's bigger than me. I didn't want to drag you into this." "You didn't," Ezra said fiercely. "Mom did, and I'm here now, so deal with it." Elias's lips twitched, almost a smile. Still stubborn as hell. "Learn from the best," Ezra shot back, and for a moment, the air between them felt lighter like it used to. But the weight of Elias's confession settled back in, heavy and cold. "We need to find that ledger," Ezra said. "If it's what they're after, it's our only leverage." Elias shook his head. "It's not that simple. If I give it to them, they'll kill me to tie up loose ends. If I don't, they'll keep coming. Then we take it to someone who can help," Ezra said. "Someone outside Victor's reach." Elias snorted. "Good luck finding that in Port Haven." Ezra's mind flashed to Riley, a friend from his New York days who'd moved to Boston to work as a private investigator. Riley was sharp, resourceful, and owed Ezra a favor after he'd helped her with a photography project for a case. "I know someone," he said, "but you have to trust me." Elias's eyes narrowed. "Trust you? After everything?" The words hit like a punch, but Ezra held his ground. "Yeah, Elias. Trust me, because I'm the one standing here, trying to save your ass, even after you told me I wasn't your brother." Elias flinched, and for a moment, silence hung between them, heavy with the ghosts of their past. Finally, Elias nodded. "Okay, but we need to move fast. Victor's not patient." They agreed to meet at dawn at a safe spot, a cabin their family owned in the woods outside town. As Elias slipped back into the night, Ezra lingered by the lighthouse, his heart pounding. He was in over his head, but he couldn't turn back. Not when Elias's life was on the line. Not when there was still a chance to fix what had been broken between them. The next morning, Ezra drove to the cabin, the road winding through dense pine forests. The air was crisp, the kind of cold that bit at your fingertips. He'd called Riley, who'd agreed to meet them and bring her expertise. When Ezra pulled up, Elias was already there, pacing outside the cabin, a duffel bag slung over his shoulder. "You brought your camera?" Elias asked, eyeing the strap across Ezra's chest. "Always," Ezra said. "Helps me think." Elias raised an eyebrow, but didn't comment. They went inside, the cabin's familiar smell of cedar and damp with stirring memories of childhood summers. But there was no time for nostalgia. Riley arrived an hour later, her short-cropped hair and no-nonsense attitude cutting through the tension. "All right," Riley said, spreading a map of the coast on the table. "Tell me everything." Elias recounted his story, filling in details he'd left out the night before. How he'd gotten involved with Victor's crew after losing his job at the harbor. How the smuggling had started small but escalated. How he tried to walk away and ended up with a target on his back. Riley listened, her eyes sharp, taking notes. "We need that ledger," she said when Elias finished. "If it's as incriminating as you say, it's our ticket to getting Victor off your back. Any idea where it might be?" Elias hesitated, then pulled a crumpled photo from his pocket. It showed a warehouse by the docks, one Ezra recognized from their childhood. "This is where they used to keep records," Elias said. "If the ledger's anywhere, it's there." "Then that's where we start," Riley said, her tone all business. "But we need a plan. Victor's not going to let you waltz in and take it." Ezra looked at Elias, saw the fear in his brother's eyes, and felt a surge of protectiveness he hadn't felt in years. "We'll figure it out," he said. Together, as they pored over the map, plotting their next move, Ezra couldn't shake the feeling that they were stepping into a trap. But for Elias, for the brother he'd lost and found again, he was willing to take the risk. The warehouse loomed like a ghost against the pre-dawn sky, its rusted walls stained by years of salt and neglect. Ezra crouched behind a stack of crates, his camera tucked away, his heart hammering as he watched the shadows for movement. Elias was beside him, silent but tense, while Riley scanned the perimeter with a flashlight, her movements precise and practiced. They'd spent the night planning, mapping out the warehouse's layout based on Elias's memory. The ledger, if it existed, was likely hidden in the office on the second floor, a room Elias had described as a fortress of locked cabinets and guarded secrets. The problem was getting in without being seen. Victor's crew patrolled the docks, and the warehouse was their hub, a place where loyalty was bought and betrayal was paid for in blood. "We go in through the side entrance," Riley whispered, pointing to a rusted door half hidden by overgrown weeds. "Elias, you know the layout. Lead the way. Ezra, stay close, and keep your eyes open." Ezra nodded, his throat tight. He wasn't a fighter, wasn't built for this kind of danger, but the thought of Elias facing it alone was worse. They moved as a unit, slipping through the shadows, the cold air biting at their skin. Elias picked the lock with surprising skill, and they eased inside, the warehouse's interior a maze of crates and machinery. The air was heavy with the smell of oil and damp wood. Ezra's eyes adjusted to the dim light, catching glimpses of fishing nets and tarps stacked haphazardly. Elias led them up a creaking metal staircase, his steps careful but quick. At the top, the office door was locked, but Riley produced a set of tools and went to work, her hand steady. "Keep watch," she murmured to Ezra, who positioned himself at the railing, scanning the warehouse floor below. Every creak of the building made his pulse spike, but he forced himself to stay calm. For Elias. The lock clicked, and they slipped inside the office. It was cramped, cluttered with papers and old coffee cups, a stark contrast to the organized chaos of the warehouse floor. Elias rifled through a filing cabinet, his movements frantic, while Riley checked a desk drawer. Ezra stood guard at the door, his ears straining for any sound of trouble. "Got it," Elias said suddenly, holding up a small, leather-bound book. The ledger. His hands trembled as he flipped through it, pages filled with names, dates, and numbers that meant nothing to Ezra, but everything to Victor. Riley took the ledger, scanning it quickly. "This is it," she said. "Enough here to put Victor away for years. But we need to get out before." A loud bang cut her off. The warehouse door below slammed open, and footsteps echoed, multiple sets, heavy and purposeful. Ezra's heart sank. Victor's men. "Hide," Riley hissed, shoving the ledger into her jacket. They ducked behind the desk, squeezing into the small space as voices filled the warehouse. Ezra could hear Victor's low, menacing tone, barking orders. They were searching for something or someone. Elias's hand gripped Ezra's arm, his breath shallow. "If they find us," he whispered, but Ezra shook his head, silencing him. He wouldn't let it come to that. Riley gestured to a window at the back of the office, barely big enough for one person to squeeze through. "We climb out," she mouthed. "Now." They moved silently, easing the window open. The drop was steep, but a stack of crates below offered a makeshift landing. Riley went first, landing with a soft thud. Elias followed, his movements clumsy but determined. Ezra was last, his heart pounding as he heard the office door rattle. Someone was trying to get in. He slid through the window just as the door burst open, landing hard on the crates below. Pain shot through his ankle, but he ignored it, following Riley and Elias as they sprinted toward the docks. Shouts echoed behind them. Victor's men had spotted them. They ducked behind a fishing boat, the ledger clutched tightly in Riley's hands. "We need to get this to the feds," she said, her voice steady despite the chaos. "There's a contact I trust in Boston. If we can get there." A gunshot cracked through the air, and Ezra instinctively pulled Elias down. The bullet missed, but the message was clear. Victor wasn't playing games. They ran again, weaving through the docks, the sound of pursuit never far behind. They reached Riley's car, parked a block away, and piled in. She floored the gas, the tires screeching as they sped out of Port Haven. Ezra glanced at Elias in the back seat, his brother's face pale but resolute. The ledger was their lifeline, but it was also a death sentence if Victor caught them. As they hit the highway, Ezra's mind raced. They had the ledger, but they weren't safe yet. Victor's reach was long, and Port Haven was his territory. Ezra looked at Elias, saw the guilt and fear etched into his features, and felt a surge of determination. He'd come back to save his brother, and he wasn't stopping now. "We're going to make this right," Ezra said, his voice firm. Elias met his gaze, and for the first time in years, there was no wall between them, just two brothers fighting to survive. The highway stretched endlessly before them, the headlights of Riley's car slicing through the pre-dawn darkness. Ezra sat in the passenger seat, his eyes flicking between the side mirror and Elias, who was slumped in the back, clutching the duffel bag like a lifeline. The ledger was safe, for now, but the weight of what they'd just escaped pressed down on them all. Riley's contact in Boston was a former FBI agent named Carla, who'd gone rogue after exposing corruption in her department. If anyone could get the ledger into the right hands without Victor's influence tainting the process, it was her. But Boston was 2 hours away, and every mile felt like a gamble. "You okay?" Ezra asked, glancing at Elias. His brother's face was drawn, the lines of exhaustion and guilt etched deep. "I got you into this," Elias said, his voice barely audible over the hum of the engine. "You should have stayed in New York." Ezra's jaw tightened. "Don't start that again. I'm here because I chose to be." Elias looked away, his eyes fixed on the passing trees. "You always were the better one," he murmured, so quietly Ezra almost missed it. The words hit harder than Ezra expected. Better? He'd spent years believing Elias was the golden child, the one who stayed, who fit in, who didn't break their family apart. But now, seeing Elias's shame, his fear, Ezra realized his brother had been carrying his own burdens all along. Riley broke the silence. "We need to lay low until we reach Carla. Victor's not going to stop, and he's got eyes everywhere. Motels, gas stations. Assume they're all compromised." Ezra nodded, his mind racing. "There's a place we used to go as kids," he said. "A hunting cabin off Route 17. It's off the grid. No one's used it in years." Riley glanced at him. "You sure it's safe?" "It's the best we've got," Ezra said. Elias nodded in agreement, his expression unreadable. They drove in silence, the tension thick. When they reached the cabin, hidden deep in a pine forest, the first light of dawn was breaking. The place was run down, the windows boarded, but it was shelter. Inside, they spread the ledger on a dusty table, its pages a map of Victor's empire, names of cops, politicians, even a judge. "This is bigger than I thought," Riley said, her voice grim. "Victor's got half the coast in his pocket." Elias's hands shook as he lit a cigarette. "That's why I couldn't just walk away. They'd have killed me the second I tried." Ezra watched his brother, saw the weight of choices made in desperation. "Why didn't you tell me?" he asked, his voice softer now. "Back then, when it started, I would have helped." Elias laughed, a bitter sound. "Helped? You were gone, Ezra. You left, and I was stuck here, trying to hold everything together. Mom, Dad, the business, they all fell apart after you came out. I blamed you for it." Ezra's chest ached, the old wound reopening. "You think I wanted to leave? You think I didn't miss you every damn day?" Elias's eyes met his, raw and unguarded. "I was wrong," he said, his voice breaking. "I was scared, Ezra. Scared of what it meant, scared of losing you, scared of what people would think. So I pushed you away instead." The confession hung between them, heavy and fragile. Ezra wanted to reach out, to bridge the gap, but Riley's voice cut through. "We don't have time for this. We need to move the ledger before Victor tracks us here." She was right. They devised a plan. Riley would take the ledger to Carla in Boston, while Ezra and Elias stayed at the cabin, out of sight. But as Riley prepared to leave, headlights flashed through the trees. A car, black, sleek, unmistakable. "Victor," Elias whispered, his face pale. Riley cursed, grabbing her gun. "Get down," she ordered, but Ezra was already moving, pulling Elias toward the back door. They slipped into the woods, the sound of car doors slamming echoing behind them. Riley stayed back, buying them time, her silhouette a shadow against the cabin's glow. They ran, branches snapping underfoot, the cold air burning their lungs. Ezra's ankle throbbed from a warehouse jump, but he pushed through, keeping Elias close. They found a stream and followed it, hoping to lose their pursuers. When they finally stopped, hidden in a thicket, Elias was shaking, not from the cold, but from fear. "I'm sorry," Elias said, his voice raw. "For everything. For what I said, for pushing you away. I didn't know how to handle it, and I lost you." Ezra's throat tightened. "You didn't lose me," he said. "I'm right here." For a moment, they were just brothers again, the years of pain and distance fading in the face of survival. But the sound of footsteps in the distance snapped them back. Victor's men were closing in. "We need to keep moving," Ezra said, pulling Elias to his feet. They pushed deeper into the woods, the ledger's weight a silent promise between them. They'd get it to Carla, expose Victor, and end this. But first, they had to survive the night. The forest was a labyrinth of shadows, the moon barely breaking through the dense canopy. Ezra and Elias moved as one, their breaths synchronized, their steps careful but urgent. The sound of pursuit had faded, but the threat lingered, a predator waiting for them to slip. They found a small cave, hidden by moss and overhanging roots, and crouched inside, catching their breath. Elias's face was streaked with dirt, his eyes wide with a mix of fear and determination. Ezra pulled out his phone, praying for a signal, but the screen was blank. They were cut off, alone except for each other. "We can't stay here long," Ezra whispered. "Riley's got the ledger, but if Victor's men find us—" "They won't," Elias said, his voice firm despite the tremor in his hands. "We'll get through this." Ezra studied his brother, saw the resolve beneath the fear. It was the Elias he remembered, the one who'd always pushed through, no matter the odds. "What happened to you, Elias?" he asked, unable to hold back. "After I left. What made you do this?" Elias leaned against the cave wall, his eyes distant. "After you came out, everything changed. Mom and Dad fought all the time. The business tanked. I felt like I had to be the one to fix it, to be the good son. But I wasn't you, Ezra. I wasn't brave enough to live my truth." Ezra's heart twisted. "You think I was brave? I was terrified. I left because I thought you all hated me." "I never hated you," Elias said, his voice breaking. "I was jealous. You were free, and I was stuck here, pretending to be someone I'm not." The confession hit Ezra like a wave, washing away years of resentment. He reached out, resting a hand on Elias's shoulder. "You're not stuck anymore," he said. "We're in this together." Elias nodded, his eyes glistening. For the first time in years, they felt like brothers again, not twins divided by pain, but partners fighting for survival. They stayed in the cave until dawn, then moved again, heading toward a rendezvous point Riley had mentioned, a gas station on the edge of town where Carla would meet them. The forest gave way to open fields, and they kept low, avoiding the roads. By midday, they reached the gas station, its neon sign flickering in the sunlight. Riley was there, her face bruised but defiant. "Carla's on her way," she said. "She's got a team ready to take the ledger and move on Victor. But we got a problem." Ezra's stomach dropped. "What?" "Victor's men hit the cabin after we left. They know we have the ledger, and they're combing the area. We need to stay out of sight until Carla gets here." They hid in the gas station's back room, surrounded by boxes of snacks and motor oil. Riley kept watch, her gun ready, while Ezra and Elias sat in silence, the weight of their reunion settling between them. "I never stopped thinking about you," Elias said suddenly, his voice low. "Every time I saw your photos online, your exhibitions, I was proud, Ezra, even if I couldn't say it." Ezra's throat tightened. "I thought you didn't care. After what you said." "I was wrong," Elias said, his voice fierce. "I was a coward. But I'm here now, and I'm not letting you go again." Before Ezra could respond, Riley hissed a warning. A black SUV pulled into the gas station, its windows tinted. Victor's men. They were out of time. Riley motioned for them to stay low, but Elias stood, his jaw set. "I'm done running," he said. If they want me, they can come get me. Ezra grabbed his arm. No way. We're not losing each other now. Riley nodded, her eyes sharp. We hold them off until Carla gets here. Ezra, you and Elias get to the back exit. I'll distract them. Ezra hesitated, but Riley's glare silenced him. Go, she said, and they moved, slipping out the back as shouts erupted from the front of the station. Gunshots followed, and Ezra's heart pounded as he pulled Elias toward the woods. They ran, the sound of chaos fading behind them. Ezra didn't know if Riley was okay, if Carla would make it, or if Victor's men would find them. But he had Elias, and for now, that was enough. The woods were a blur of green and brown, the ground uneven under Ezra's boots as he and Elias ran. The gunfire at the gas station had stopped, leaving an eerie silence that felt more dangerous than the chaos. Ezra's ankle screamed with every step, but he pushed through, his hand gripping Elias's arm, as if letting go would mean losing him again. They found a ditch and ducked inside, their breaths ragged. Elias's face was pale, his eyes scanning the trees for any sign of pursuit. You think Riley's okay? He asked, his voice tight. She's tough, Ezra said, though doubt gnawed at him. She'll make it. They waited, the minutes stretching into eternity. Finally, the sound of an engine broke the silence. A different one, softer, not the heavy roar of Victor's SUV. Ezra peeked over the edge of the ditch and saw a gray sedan pulling up. Carla. Relief flooded him, but it was short-lived. Another vehicle followed, a black truck, one of Victor's. Stay down, Ezra whispered, his heart racing. Carla stepped out, her face calm but alert, the ledger tucked under her arm. She scanned the area, then signaled with a low whistle. Ezra and Elias emerged, moving quickly to her side. You've got a knack for trouble, Carla said, her voice dry as she handed Ezra the ledger. This is enough to take Victor down, but we need to get it to my contact at the FBI now. Before Ezra could respond, the truck's doors opened, and 3 men stepped out, guns drawn. Victor himself was among them, his cold eyes locking onto Elias. You thought you could run? He called, his voice carrying a chilling calm. Give me the ledger, and maybe I let one of you live. Ezra's grip tightened on the ledger. You're not getting it, he said, stepping in front of Elias. His voice was steady, but fear coiled in his chest. He wasn't a hero, but he'd be damned if he let Victor take his brother. Carla drew her weapon, her stance unwavering. Back off, Victor. The feds are already on their way. You're done. Victor's smile was venomous. You think I don't have people in the FBI? Hand it over, or I start shooting. Elias stepped forward, his hands raised. Take me, he said, his voice shaking but resolute. Let them go. No. Ezra grabbed Elias, pulling him back. We're not doing this. Victor raised his gun, and time seemed to slow. Ezra's mind raced, searching for a way out, but before he could act, a new sound cut through the tension. Sirens, distant but growing louder. Victor's men hesitated, and Carla seized the moment. Drop it, she shouted, her gun trained on Victor. The sirens grew closer, and Victor's confidence wavered. He lowered his weapon, his eyes burning with rage. This isn't over, he spat, then signaled his men to retreat. They piled into the truck and sped off, leaving dust in their wake. Carla turned to Ezra and Elias, her expression grim. We need to move. Now. They piled into her sedan, the ledger clutched tightly in Ezra's hands. As they drove, the sirens grew louder, and Ezra saw flashing lights in the distance. FBI, not Victor's corrupted cops. For the first time, hope flickered in his chest. At a safe house outside Boston, Carla handed the ledger to her contact, a no-nonsense agent named Torres. He scanned it, his face darkening with every page. This is enough to take down Victor and half his network, he said. But you two need to stay low until we make arrests. Ezra nodded, his arm around Elias's shoulders. His brother was shaking, the weight of years of fear and guilt finally breaking. It's over, Ezra said softly. You're free. Elias looked at him, his eyes wet. I don't deserve this, he said. Not after what I did to you. Ezra shook his head. You're my brother. That's enough. They stayed at the safe house, guarded by Torres's team, as the FBI moved in on Victor's operation. Days passed, tense but quiet, and Ezra and Elias began to talk, not just about the danger, but about everything they'd missed. The pain of their past, the love that had never truly died, the hope for something better. One night, as they sat on the safe house porch, the city lights distant but comforting, Elias reached for Ezra's hand. I'm proud of you, he said, his voice steady. For who you are, for never giving up on me. Ezra's throat tightened, and he squeezed Elias's hand. We're family, he said. Always will be. The safe house was a cocoon of quiet, a stark contrast to the chaos of the past week. Ezra sat by the window, his camera resting on the table, its lens capturing nothing but the stillness of the moment. Elias was across the room, reading a book, his face softer than Ezra had seen in years. The ledger was gone, safely in the FBI's hands, and Victor's empire was crumbling. Arrests had been made, headlines splashed across Boston papers. But for Ezra, the real victory was here, in this room, where he and Elias were finally rebuilding what had been broken. They'd spent days talking, unraveling the years of pain and misunderstanding. Elias had apologized again and again, each time more raw, more honest. Ezra had forgiven him, not because it was easy, but because it was necessary for both of them. I'm thinking of leaving Port Haven, Elias said suddenly, closing his book, starting over somewhere new, maybe out west. California, maybe. Ezra raised an eyebrow, a smile tugging at his lips. You? In California? You'll hate the traffic. Elias laughed, the sound warm and genuine. Maybe, but I need a change. I need to figure out who I am without all this weight. Ezra nodded, understanding. He'd found himself in New York, in the chaos of the city and the art that gave him purpose. Elias deserved that chance too. You'll find it, he said, and I'll be there, wherever you end up. Elias met his gaze, his eyes steady. You mean that? Always, Ezra said, and he meant it. They were twins, bound by more than blood, and no amount of pain could sever that. A week later, they stood on a Boston pier, the ocean stretching out before them. The FBI had cleared them to leave, Victor's network dismantled, his influence shattered. Riley had survived, her bruises fading, and she'd joined them to say goodbye. Carla was there too, her sharp eyes softened by a rare smile. You two did good, Carla said, handing Ezra a card with her number. If you ever need me, you know where to find me. Riley hugged them both, her grip fierce. Don't get into any more trouble, she teased, though her eyes were serious. And Ezra, keep taking those pictures. The world needs your eyes. As Riley and Carla left, Ezra and Elias stood alone, the wind carrying the salt of the sea. Elias turned to him, his expression open, vulnerable. I don't know how to thank you, he said. You risked everything for me, even after everything. Ezra shook his head. You'd have done the same for me. Elias smiled, a real smile, the kind Ezra hadn't seen since they were kids. Yeah, he said, I would. They walked along the pier, side by side, their steps in sync. The future was uncertain. Elias's new start, Ezra's return to New York. But for the first time, it felt possible. They'd faced their past, fought for their present, and now they could build something new. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of gold and crimson, Ezra lifted his camera, capturing the moment. Two brothers, reunited, standing together against the world. The shutter clicked, and Ezra knew this was the image he'd carry forever, not just of survival, but of love, forgiveness, and the unbreakable bond that had brought them back to each other.